And this is how you became enmagicked, my darling. This is where your magic comes from. You drank deeply from the moon, and now the moon is full within you. It was as though it was not Luna sitting on the floor, but a picture of Luna instead. She did not blink. Her face was as still as stone. Zan waved her hand in front of the girl's face, and nothing happened. Nothing at all. Oh dear, said Zan. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Zan scooped the girl into her arms and ran out the door, sobbing, looking for Glurk. It took most of the afternoon for the child to regain herself. Well, Glurk said, this is a bit of a pickle. It's nothing of the kind, Zan snapped. I'm sure it's temporary, she added, as though her words alone could make it true. But it wasn't temporary. This was the consequence of Zan's spell. The child was now unable to learn about magic. She couldn't hear it, couldn't speak it, couldn't even know the word. Every time she heard anything to do with magic, her consciousness and her spark and her very soul seemed to simply disappear. And whether the knowledge was being sucked into the kernel in Luna's brain, or whether it was flying away entirely, Zan did not know. What will we do when she comes of age? Glurk asked. How will you teach her then? Because you will surely die then, Glurk thought, but did not say. Her magic will open, and yours will pour away, and you, my dear, darling 500-year-old Zan, will no longer have magic in you to keep you alive. He felt the cracks in his own heart deepen. Deeper. Maybe she won't grow, Zan said desperately. Maybe she will stay like this forever, and I will never have to say goodbye to her. Maybe I mislaid the spell, and her magic will never come out. Maybe she was never magic to begin with. You know that isn't true, Glurk said. It might be true, Zan countered. You don't know. She paused before she spoke again. The alternative is too sorrowful to contemplate. Zan, Glurk began. Sorrow is dangerous, she snapped, and then she left in a huff. They had this conversation again and again with no resolution. Eventually, Zan refused to discuss it at all. The child was never magic, Zan started telling herself. And indeed, the more Zan told herself that it might be true, the more she was able to convince herself that it was true. And if Luna ever was magic, all that power was now neatly stoppered up and wouldn't be a problem. Perhaps it was stuck forever. Perhaps Luna was now a regular girl. A regular girl. Zan said it again and again and again, and said it so many times that it must be true. It's exactly what she told people in the free cities when they asked. A regular girl, she said. She also told them Luna was allergic to magic. Hives, she said. Seizures, itchy eyes, stomach upset. She asked everyone to never mention magic near the girl, and so no one did. Zan's advice was always followed to the letter. In the meantime, there was a whole world for Luna to learn. Science, mathematics, poetry, philosophy, art. Surely that would be enough. Surely she would grow as a girl grows, and Zan would continue as she was. Still magic, slow to age, deathless Zan. Surely Zan would never have to say goodbye. This can't go on, Glurk said over and over. Luna needs to know what's inside her. She needs to know how magic works. She needs to know what death is. She needs to be prepared. I'm sure I have no idea what you're talking about, Zan said. She's just a regular girl. Even if she wasn't before, she certainly is now. My own magic is replenished, and I hardly ever use it in any case. There's no need to upset her. Why would we speak of impending loss? Why would we introduce her to that kind of sorrow? It's dangerous, Glurk, remember? Glurk wrinkled his brow. Why do we think that? He asked. Zan shook her head. I have no idea. And she didn't. She knew once, but the memory had vanished. It was easier to forget. And so Luna grew. And she didn't know about the starlight or the moonlight or the tight knot behind her forehead. And she didn't remember about the enrabbiting of Glurk or the flowers in her footsteps or the power that was, even now, clicking through its gears, pulsing inexorably toward its endpoint. She didn't know about the hard, tight seed of magic, readying to crack open inside her. She had absolutely no idea. Chapter 15, in which Entane tells a lie. The scars from the paper birds never healed, not properly anyway. They were just paper, Entane's mother wailed. How is it possible that they cut so deep? It wasn't just the cuts. The infections after the cuts were far worse. Not to mention the considerable loss of blood. Entane had lain on the floor for a long time, while the mad woman attempted to stop his bleeding with paper, and not very well. The medicines the sisters gave her made her woozy and weak. She drifted in and out of consciousness. When the guards finally came to check on him, both he and the mad woman lay in a puddle of so much blood, it took them a moment to find out who exactly it belonged to. And why, his mother fumed, did they not come for you when you cried out? Why did they abandon you? No one knew the answer to that one. The sisters claimed they had no idea. They hadn't heard him. And later, one look at the whiteness in their faces and their bloodshot eyes led everyone to believe that it was true. People whispered that Antain had cut himself. People whispered that his story of the paper birds was just a fantasy. After all, no one found any birds, just bloody wads of paper on the ground. And anyway, who had ever heard of an attacking paper bird? People whispered like a boy that a boy like that had no business being an elder in training, and on that point, Antain couldn't have agreed more. By the time his wounds were healed, he had announced to the council that he was resigning, effective immediately, freed from school, from the council, and from the constant needling of his mother. Antain became a carpenter, and he was very good at it. The council, owing to its members' profound discomfort, whenever they had to look at the deep scars covering the poor boy's face, not to mention his mother's insistence, had given the boy a tidy sum of money with which he was able to secure rare woods and fine tools from the teachers who did their business via the road. And oh, those scars, and oh, how handsome he used to be, and oh, that lost potential. Such a pity it was. What a great and terrible pity. Antain got to work. Very quickly, as word of his skill and artistry spread on both ends of the road, Antain made a good enough living to keep his mother and brothers happy and content. He built a separate home for himself, smaller, simpler, and infinitely more humble, but comfortable all the same. Still, his mother did not approve of his departure from the council and told him as much. His brother Rook didn't understand either, though his disapproval came much later, after he had been dismissed from the tower and returned home in shame. Rook's note, unlike his brother's, did not contain the preface, "We had high hopes," and instead simply said, "This one has disappointed us." Their mother blamed Antain. Antain hardly noticed. He spent his days away from everyone else, working with wood and metal and oil, the itch of sawdust, the slip of the grain under his fingers. The making of something beautiful and whole and real was all he cared about. Months passed, years. Still his mother fussed at him. "What kind of person leaves the council?" she howled one day, after she had insisted that he accompany her to the market. She needled and complained as she perused the different stalls, with their various selections of medicinal and beautifying flowers, as well as zerin honey and zerin jam and dried zerin petals, which could be reconstituted with milk and slathered over the face to prevent wrinkles. Not everyone could afford to shop in the market. Most people bartered with their neighbors to keep their cupboards slightly less bare, and even those who could manage to visit to the market could not afford the heaps of good that Antain's mother piled into her basket. Being the only sister of the grand elder had its advantages. She narrowed her eyes as at the dried zerin petals. She gave the woman standing in the stall a hard look. "How long ago were these harvested, and don't you dare lie to me?" The flower woman turned pale. "I cannot say, madam," she mumbled. Antain's mother gave her an imperious look. "If you cannot say, then I shall not pay," and she moved on to the next stall. Antain did not comment, and instead let his gaze drift upward to the tower, running his fingers over the deep gouges and gorges and troughs that marred his face, following the rivers of scars like a map. "Well," his mother said as she browsed through bolts of cloth that had been brought from the other end of the road, "we can only hope that when this ridiculous carpentry enterprise winds itself toward its inevitable end, your honorable uncle will take you back, if not as a council member, then at least as a member of his staff, and then one day your little brother's staff. At least he has the good sense to listen to his mother." Antain nodded and grunted and said nothing. He found himself wandering toward the paper vendor's stall. He hardly ever touched paper anymore, not if he could help it. Still, these zerin papers were lovely. He let his fingers drift across the reams and let his mind drift to the rusty sounds of paper wings flying across the face of the mountain and disappearing from sight. Antain's mother was wrong about his coming failure, though. The carpentry shop business remained a success, not only among the small, moneyed enclave of the Protectorate and the famously tight-fisted Traders' Association. His carvings and furniture and clever constructions were in high demand on the other side of the road as well. Every month the traders arrived with a list of orders, and every month Antain had to turn some of them away, explaining kindly that he was only one person with two hands, and his time was naturally limited. On hearing such refusals, the traders offered Antain more and more money for his handiwork, and as Antain honed his skills, and as his eye became clear and cunning, and as his designs became more and more clever, so did his renown increase. Within 5 years, his name was known in towns he had never heard of, let alone thought to visit. Mayors of far-off places requested the honor of his company. Antain considered it. Of course he did. He had never left the Protectorate. He didn't know anyone who had, though his family could certainly afford to. But even the thought of doing anything but work and sleep, the occasional book read by the fire, was more than he could manage. Sometimes it felt to him that the world was heavy, that the air thick